"You're not an entrepreneur, babe. You're just bored." That's how the night opened. No warning, no soft landing, just that sentence tossed across a white tablecloth at Canlis like a napkin someone couldn't be bothered to fold. The table went quiet for a heartbeat, then the chuckles started. Neat, polite, like everyone had agreed to laugh just enough to be safe. I felt the stem of my wine glass slip against my fingertips. My palm had gone damp. We were at our anniversary dinner, except it wasn't really ours. Dylan invited his colleagues because visibility matters. I told myself I could handle that. Seattle glowed outside the windows, the water dark and calm. And inside, everything smelled like butter and lemon and success. Jazz hummed. Candles made everyone's skin look warm and expensive. I felt small and shiny at the same time, like a coin someone had dropped. Erin sat across from me, the star realtor wife, diamonds twinkling every time she lifted her fork. "So, Maya, what do you do?" she asked, smiling like she expected an easy answer. My throat dried out. I cleared it and sat a little straighter. "I'm building an eco-bag brand. I've started—" Dylan cut through my sentence with a laugh that landed like ice. "Yeah, her little craft shop. It's cute." Cute. The words scraped. Around us, the laughs got a little louder, the kind you hear at work events when people don't want to pick a side. My cheeks burned. The waiter, mid-pour over my glass, hesitated so delicately you'd miss it unless your heart was crawling up your neck like mine. His eyes flicked at me, then away, as if he'd seen a glass crack. I tried to smile. My lips felt paper thin. "It's sustainable. I'm sourcing materials and—" "She spends my money making tote bags," Dylan said, like a line from a show he'd been practicing. He lifted his glass, so casual. "Passion project, right, babe?" Another round of polite laughter. Even the silverware seemed to tinkle harder, like it knew its job was to drown me out. Heat climbed my chest. I stared at the candle and tried to breathe slow. The flame wobbled. My wine trembled in the glass. I locked my wrist to stop the shake and tasted the bitterness of my own mouth. I told myself to be grateful, to be— The server placed our plates, halibut, perfect and pale, sides arranged like they'd been measured. I picked up my fork and couldn't feel my fingers. Metal against porcelain clicked too loud. I caught my reflection in the window. A woman in a sleek dress, shoulders pulled back like a hanger, was hiding under the fabric. I looked like I belonged, until I blinked and saw the tension in my jaw. "Hey," Dylan said to the table, already turning away from me. "Speaking of launches, wait till you see the numbers from our beta." The men leaned in, laughter loosened. They talked in acronyms and budgets and projections. Dylan's voice went bigger, smoother, like he was being filmed. I sat there, the center of nothing, cutting food I couldn't taste. I wanted to disappear into the linen and the lemon and the low music. I wanted to vanish between the threads of the tablecloth. Erin tried again. "How long have you been crafting?" "Designing," I said. My throat tightened. "A few months." Dylan grinned. "Since she discovered Etsy." A couple of the guys snorted. One did that sympathetic wince people do when they're complicit but don't want to be villains. My skin prickled all over, like I'd stepped into cold rain. I stared at my plate until the fish blurred. "I'm learning a lot," I said, quiet. "I'm building something." Dylan tipped his head, that patronizing tilt I'd started recognizing in tiny moments. "From our home." "Using my office, and the internet I pay for." "Dylan," I said, because his name was all I could manage without cracking. I felt my pulse boom in my ears. It drowned the music, the clink of glasses, the way the city sighed outside. He lifted his glass to the table. "To passion projects," he said, grin sharp. "May they stay adorable." Glasses lifted. Crystal touched crystal. The sound went clean and bright and cruel. I tried to swallow and felt nothing move. I forced a breath so steady it hurt my ribs. I could feel the sweat at the base of my neck, damp under my hair. "Congrats on your launch," Erin said to Dylan. "Big night." He looked at me, that soft warning smile men give when they want you to behave. "Right, babe?" My fingers tightened around the fork until my knuckles ached. I loosened them and set it down like I was I didn't mean to offend, Erin said, softer now, as if she'd spotted the bruise under my makeup. It's fine, I said, because that's what I'd been trained by life to say. Really. But it wasn't fine. It was a small theft happening in a beautiful room. It was my idea reduced to a punchline because it didn't come with a company badge. It was the way people smiled while they agreed my worth was a hobby. The server returned. More wine? He asked, neutral and careful. Please, I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't tremble. As he poured, I watched the liquid rise and settle, a small tide I could control. I lifted the glass, felt the weight, and took a measured sip. The warmth spread down my throat, steadying me from the inside out. Dylan laughed loud at his own joke. The men followed. The sound washed over my shoulders and slid off. I felt the room again. The velvet of the chair, the smoothness of the linen under my fingertips, the faint throb where my ring pressed into my skin. I felt present inside my own body. Passion project, I said softly, just for me. I tasted the words and they didn't sour me. Dylan turned back with that easy smirk, ready to throw the next line. Having fun, babe? I met his eyes. The laugh died in his throat just for a second. My heart went quiet, like I'd stepped into a soundproof room. I leaned in an inch, enough to make sure I wasn't imagining my own strength. We'll see who pays who, Dylan, I whispered. He blinked, surprised by the edge in my voice. What? Nothing, I said, and sat back. I let the silence close over the table for a beat. Then I lifted my glass and smiled like I had a secret, because I did. The muscles in my face relaxed. The burning in my cheeks cooled. My hands were still. The conversation moved on without me. Numbers, partners, projections, wins, laughter, clinks, the soft drum of approval. I watched the city lights blink through the glass and listened to my breathing even out. The flame on my table stopped wobbling. No one asked me another question. No one noticed that I'd stopped shrinking. That was fine. I didn't need witnesses for this part. I just needed to feel the weight of my words settle. He used to say, "When I make it, you'll never have to worry again." I can still hear the warmth in his voice when he said it. Back then, the words wrapped around me like a blanket that actually fit. I believed him because I needed to. I wanted a future that sounded sturdy. I wanted to stop counting coins in a coffee mug and stop pretending instant noodles tasted like anything but salt and defeat. Those early years lived in our tiny U-District apartment, the one that always smelled faintly damp. The windows sweated in winter, and the heater clanged like it wanted out. We taped the corners of the carpet where it curled and threatened to trip us. Every surface collected textbooks and unopened bills. I made a habit of stacking them by color so they looked less dangerous. By day, I worked as a marketing intern, smiling at a screen for 8 hours and pretending the unpaid part was opportunity. By night, I slid into black shoes and a stiff apron, poured beers for grad students, and wiped down tables sticky with other people's problems. My feet pulsed when I sat on the bus home, a drumbeat that kept me awake enough to study a little, plan a little, and breathe a little. Dylan was beautiful in ambition back then. MBA case studies spread across our bed. He spoke in verbs that moved: scale, build, launch, lead. He'd pace the narrow kitchen with a highlighter between his teeth and say, "It's all about leverage." I'd nod like I understood, because love made me want to meet him at his level. I made ramen last 3 days by adding frozen vegetables and faith. When he said, "I'll pay you back for tuition," I shrugged and told him it wasn't like that. But I kept the receipt in a folder anyway, just to hold proof that I mattered. We were a team, or that's what I called it when I was too tired to call it what it was, me holding the bottom while he climbed. I believed in him. I made his coffee at midnight when he had group projects. I edited his cover letters until the words felt smooth and inevitable. I bought a thrift store blazer and wore it to his mock interviews, playing the part of firm handshake. We didn't have much, but I loved the small rituals, his forehead against mine before exams, The walk home with grocery bags cutting lines into my fingers. The way he rubbed my... I was so tired that the words felt like mercy. I quit the bar job first, then the internship. I told myself it was temporary, just until my own thing had legs. I started sewing at the kitchen table, pulling apart old jeans and thrifted curtains, turning scraps into something that could hold the weight of a day. I ironed late at night, the steam warming my face until sweat ran behind my ears. I thought I could thread a purpose out of fabric. He encouraged me with a smile that eventually learned to smirk. He'd pick up a bag and say, "You're not saving the planet with tote bags, babe." He said it like a joke, and I laughed with him at first. I told myself he didn't mean it. I told myself I was sensitive because I was new at this. But the words landed and stayed, like lint you can't brush off. The money changed without warning. "Let's open a joint account," he said, "just to keep things organized." I nodded because organization sounded safe. He set up transfers and budgets and a weekly card for me. "400's plenty, right?" he asked. "Groceries, gas, your fun stuff." I smiled and said, "Of course." I didn't ask what fun meant. I quietly stopped buying fresh flowers from the stand near the bus stop. I learned to count items in the cart twice. I whispered thank you when he paid for takeout, even though it was our home, our dinner, our life. The thank yous stacked between us like bricks. I didn't notice the line I crossed until I was far past it. At first, I asked out of politeness, "Can I get more thread this week?" I'd text, or, "I'm running low on interfacing." He always replied, "Sure, babe. Easy." But there are tones people use when they want you to hear the cost. "I'll move some things around," he'd add, and my stomach would flip with a guilt I hadn't earned. Soon I heard myself saying, "It's okay, I'll wait." I started rationing supplies. I started rationing hope. My mother tried to help in the only way she knew. "He's just being a provider." Let him. I stood at her sink, rinsing dishes, the smell of dish soap familiar and clean. "You're lucky, Maya," she said. "Men like that are rare." "Maybe," I said. The water ran hot against my hands, and I watched steam curl. The sentence landed in my chest and took up space it didn't deserve. Lucky. I wanted to feel lucky. "You're quiet," he'd say. "I'm tired," I'd answer. "Of course," he'd reply. "You nap." "You've earned it." Earned what? Rest from what? I didn't say those parts out loud. The joint account made everything blur. My money was his money, was our money, was his plan. I started pausing before buying elastic or needles, thinking of the number in the app as something I had to respect like a parent. When he said he'd set a weekly limit to help us track, I nodded again. Structure is love, I told myself. Accountability is intimacy, but love shouldn't make you ask permission to breathe. The shame didn't come all at once. It was a quiet drip. A weekend brunch I declined because I didn't want to spend the extra. A pair of scissors I put back because they were too nice. The way I caught myself saying, "Thanks for covering the electricity," like I lived in a guest room. My world shrank until the walls of our condo felt like the edges of a jar. One night, he sat on the couch with spreadsheets, legs stretched out, voice bright. "If my bonus hits, we could upgrade the car," he said. "Imagine frothier lattes." He laughed at his own joke. I stitched a handle and pricked my finger. A dot of blood bloomed on canvas. I pressed my thumb to it, held it until the sting settled. My chest cooled and then tightened again. I looked at him and wondered when we started speaking different languages. I used to build his dreams. When did I stop building mine? The thought arrived uninvited and crystal clear. It made my throat ache. I bent over the machine like a confession and kept sewing because movement was safer than silence. The days blurred, except for little moments that punched through. Finding a perfect yard of fabric at a thrift store for $2 and walking home like I'd won something real. Selling a bag to a stranger online and rereading their message, beautiful work, like it was scripture. Packing orders at the kitchen table, heart racing as tape squealed against cardboard. I felt alive in the work, even if I hid that aliveness under jokes like his to make it easier for him to hold. Then, the small crack of a morning that didn't look special. I woke to gray light leaking through the blinds. The apartment was quiet. No spreadsheets, no hum of the fridge struggling. I made cheap coffee and sat at my laptop to check messages. Most days it was spam, a few likes, a polite question about shipping. I clicked open my inbox and saw a subject line that made my heart stutter. Order inquiry, Capitol Hill. I clicked. We'd love to order 200 bags, $2,000 total. I read it once, too fast. Then again, slower. My hands went cold. I put the mug down because I was afraid I'd drop it. I read it a third time and the words didn't rearrange themselves. They held. I pressed my fingers to my lips and let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh or a sob. It was relief with edges. I wrote back, careful, professional, like I'd done this 100 times. My hands trembled and left little heel-shaped marks of sweat on the edge of the laptop. When I hit send, I stared at the screen, waiting for it to punish me for daring. Nothing happened, except the quiet miracle of an email leaving and the world not ending. I didn't tell him, not because I was petty, not because I wanted to make a scene later. I kept it to myself because the feeling in my chest was too clean to share. For once, it was mine without permission. I stood in our narrow kitchen, leaned my forehead against the cabinet door, and let tears slide into my hairline. I wasn't crying about money. I was crying because someone I didn't know looked at my work and saw value, without any translation through him. My phone buzzed, a friend's meme, the weather, a sale on shoes. I ignored everything. I boiled eggs, I cut fruit. I did small, ordinary things to keep from shaking apart. Every few minutes I didn't need fireworks. I didn't need applause. I needed the quiet yes that finally belonged to me. I closed the computer and sat there a long time, breathing like I was learning a new rhythm. For the first time in months, I fell asleep smiling, and I didn't say a word. That's a woman who knows business. He said it lightly, like a compliment floating across our kitchen, but it hit my chest like a finger pressing down. I was tying twine on a small box, Etsy label half peeled, and the knot slipped because my fingers went cold. The TV murmured in the living room. LinkedIn posts flashed across his phone. Promotions, awards, photos of people standing in front of logos. I could hear the smile in his voice even without looking up. I knew exactly who he meant. Erin, the coworker's wife, the walking benchmark. She just closed another $5 million property, he added, casual as weather. Numbers like that? She's next level. The apartment looked extra bright that afternoon, glass clean, sun cutting hard across the marble island Dylan loved to brag about. The same light made the dust on my sewing table glow. I brushed threads off my wrist and cleared my throat. Congrats to her, I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. He scrolled. Maybe you could learn from her. There it was, the tidy sentence he'd been building toward all week, laid out neat for me to swallow. I forced the breath through my nose and kept tying. The twine burned against my skin. I told myself it was just a comment, not a verdict, but my jaw clenched on its own. He came over and tapped the box I'd finished. Cute, he said, half smiling. I nodded. Thanks. I mean it, he added, like he was offering me grace. But playtime only gets you so far. Something tightened low in my stomach. I placed the box with the others and wiped my palms on my jeans. The room felt smaller. I could smell the lemon cleaner I'd used that morning, and it suddenly made me nauseous. I'm not playing, I said, barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. The TV did, filling the silence with another ad for people who owned suits nicer than ours. I slid a shipping label straight with my thumb and told myself to be calm. Calm didn't belong to him. Calm was mine. The comparison. He started bragging to friends in a way that sounded generous if you didn't live with it. I made her life easy. She just plays designer now. Laughter followed like it had a map. I felt my face heat and pretended to sip my drink. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I could taste the cheap tannin of red wine and something that felt like rust. I smiled because smiling is armor that doesn't clink. Inside, I kept a list. Not on paper, in muscle. The way my hands trembled when he said, plays. The way my pulse spiked when he said, I made. the way I shrank a millimeter each time and then grew back at night when the apartment went quiet and the sewing machine hummed like a promise. "Focus on your passion," he had told me once, like he was handing me a gift he could repossess. Now I heard passion the way people say phase. I pressed my palm to my sternum when I worked, felt the steady thud beneath bone, and told myself it was not a hobby. It was a build. It was breath. So I changed my hours. When he fell asleep on the couch, I filmed quick TikToks with my phone propped against a water glass. How I cut patterns, how I reinforced straps, how I thrifted for materials. I posted quietly and watched in the dark as strangers left tiny hearts. I learned simple edits. I learned that people paused longer if I showed my mess before the result. I learned that my hands could tell a story even when my mouth stayed shut. I took better photos. I found the corner of the living room where the light softened around noon and set up a white poster board against the wall. I ironed each bag until the edges behaved. I wrote descriptions that sounded like me, not like a catalog. I stopped saying just. I stopped apologizing for price. I measured, weighed, listed, shipped. I stacked small boxes like bricks and built a quiet wall between who I'd been and who I was becoming. The first month I made $800. I told no one. I watched the number in my Etsy dashboard the way people watch weather. The second month hit $2,500. A customer sent a message, "Your bag made my commute better." I read that line 3 times and let it unknot something in me. The third month crossed $6,000. My hands shook when I transferred the money. Then I opened a new... I kept at it. Not for his pat on the head, but because I felt heat in my ribs when a stranger tracked their package and I could picture the route. Because the sound of tape tearing off the roll felt like progress. Because every sale lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying in my shoulders. The nights I used to spend asking permission for small purchases, I spent learning ads. I watched how a 10-second clip of a strap holding a gallon of milk outperformed a perfect flat lay. I watched how people answered questions when I asked for color preferences. I listened. It turned out my customers liked being seen more than being sold. It turned out I did, too. A dinner party pushed the pressure to a sharp edge. Dylan poured drinks like he owned the room. The city glittered outside, and the conversation turned toward promotions and bonuses. Someone asked him how we balance things at home. He grinned, easy and wide. "She's lucky I let her chase her hobbies," he said. "Let," the word set off a ringing in my ears. The laughter came, polite as always. My chest went tight, then tighter. I put my glass down quietly and felt the cool circle it left on my palm. For a second, I saw myself from the outside. Head tilted, smile fixed, the girl everyone assumes is fine. I looked at him for a long moment. He broke eye contact. He always did when I got too quiet. I swallowed. "You'll learn soon. Creation isn't play," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clean. The table paused. Forks hovered. He laughed quickly, like he could turn the moment back into a joke if he were fast enough. "Okay, Picasso," he said, winking at the group. I let the silence sit for 1 beat longer than comfortable. Then I smiled like I had a secret, and the room exhaled. Conversation shifted. My heartbeat slowed from a sprint to a jog. I felt something unclench between my shoulder blades. I touched the ring on my finger and realized my hand had stopped shaking. Back home, the apartment felt different. Not bigger, not smaller, just mine in the corners I'd claimed. He dropped on the couch and started scrolling again, laughing at some story I didn't follow. I loaded the dishwasher, wiped the counter, and carried my laptop to the bedroom with that same small smile still lit in me. The door clicked softly. I pressed my palm against my sternum and felt the steadiness there. Not adrenaline, not panic, something else, something like arrival. I thought of all the times I'd nodded to keep the peace, and all the nights I'd chosen to work instead of cry. I thought of the twine burning my fingers and the jokes about play. I thought of Erin, and the way her name had been used as a mirror to make me disappear. I didn't disappear. I watched the orders refresh. A woman from Portland, a teacher from Ohio, a nurse who wrote, "I need a bag that won't quit on me." I typed, "You've got it," and meant more than the bag. The apartment was quiet except for a faint laugh track leaking under the door. I smiled at the screen until my cheeks hurt. I didn't text anyone. I didn't run into the living room to show him. I held the moment like a cup of warm water between both hands and let it sink into me. My phone buzzed with another notification. I jumped, then laughed at myself. I wiped a tired tear with the side of my wrist, careful not to smear anything, careful not to lose the shape of this feeling. I closed my eyes, inhaled slow, and opened them again to the small, steady miracle of my own work moving without permission. In the half-dark of our bedroom, with the laptop glowing like a private sunrise, I let the quiet swallow the last of my doubt. Then I leaned forward, clicked fulfill, and watched the next order appear. The perfume on his jacket wasn't mine. It was heavier, sweeter, something that didn't belong in our home. I smelled it the moment I picked up his blazer from the couch, the kind of scent that lingers, not by accident, but because it wants to be found. I froze with the fabric pressed between my fingers, my heart catching on a beat that wouldn't finish. The night outside was still, Seattle rain against the glass, the hum of the city below, but inside the silence started to hiss. He'd said he had a client dinner. He always did lately. Meetings, deadlines, late nights. I'd stopped asking questions weeks ago, because every question turned into an argument about trust, and somehow I always ended up apologizing for doubting him. I laid the jacket over the chair and tried not to stare at the faint lipstick stain near the collar. Red. My stomach knotted so tight I felt dizzy. I sank onto the edge of the couch, staring at the city lights outside our window. All those windows, glowing with other people's lives. I wondered how many of them looked happy from the outside, too. When I finally heard his key turn in the lock, I didn't move. He walked in, smelling faintly of whiskey and rain, tie loosened, still smiling from wherever he'd been. "Hey," he said, shrugging off his coat. "You're up late." I set the receipt on the coffee table. My voice came out lower than I expected. "Was it business, Dylan?" He glanced at the paper, blinked once, then smiled, that same polished grin he used at work events. "It's business, Maya." Just that. No stumble, no guilt. Smooth as glass. I nodded. My throat felt dry. My body didn't move, but something inside me folded in half. I didn't ask another question because the answers were already bleeding through the silence. He walked past me into the bedroom, humming, like nothing had happened, like I was no one who mattered enough to hurt. I went to the bathroom, shut the door, and turned on the shower. The water came down hot, then hotter, until it burned my skin. I sank to the floor, knees to chest, hair plastered against my face. The tile was cold, the air smelled like soap and heartbreak. I let the water hit me until I couldn't tell where it ended and my tears began. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just let myself dissolve quietly, piece by piece. "He killed something soft in me," I whispered into the steam. When I came out, the apartment was dark. He was already asleep. His phone glowed faintly on the nightstand. I looked at it for a long second, then turned away. I didn't want proof anymore. I already had it. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The room still smelled faintly of his cologne and that ghost of someone else's perfume. I sat up slowly, the sheets heavy on my legs. He was asleep beside me, mouth open slightly, breathing even, like peace belonged only to him. I slipped out of bed, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. No music, no distractions, just the quiet tapping of keys. I didn't know what else to do with the ache, so I poured it into... I didn't check notifications at first, but by evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Comments, follows, shares. Someone tagged a friend. Someone said, "I need this." Then 10, then 100. By midnight, it had gone viral. Orders flooded in, one after another. My dashboard blinked and blinked. $20,000 in 24 hours. I stared at the number until my vision blurred again. This time, it wasn't from tears. It was disbelief, raw, trembling disbelief. I didn't laugh. I didn't scream. I just whispered to myself, "Don't cry now. Not for him. Not for this." My hands shook as I touched the screen. Each sale felt like a heartbeat. Each notification sounded like a pulse. I sat there in the dim light, alone, but not lonely for the first time in years. The next morning, I went out and bought a new MacBook, a sewing machine that didn't jam every 10 minutes, paid cash. The clerk asked if I wanted a bag, and I smiled to myself before saying, "No thanks, I make my own." Back home, I set everything up on my side of the apartment, my space, my tools, my air. I worked all day, the rhythm of the machine matching my breathing. The steady hum drowned out every memory of his voice. The needle's click became a drumbeat for something alive again. When I finished, I looked at my reflection in the mirror across the room. My eyes were puffy, ringed with fatigue, but there was a light there I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. "You built your ego," I whispered to the empty room. "I'll build my empire." The words didn't sound angry. They sounded like truth. That night, I heard him in the living room, laughing on a call, his voice full of charm. He still sounded like a man who believed the world revolved around him. I closed my laptop softly, the faint glow fading into darkness. "He still thinks I'm beneath him," I murmured, sliding into bed. "Let him." The city outside was quiet, the rain just beginning again. I turned toward the window, eyes open, breathing slow. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like space, a space I was finally ready to fill. "You're still wasting my money on that hobby?" That's how it started. Not with a scream, not with a... I didn't move. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, the glow spilling across my hands. The page in front of me showed my sales dashboard, still open from earlier. I hadn't planned on this moment, but something deep in me, something old and tired, knew it was coming. He kept going. "You should be grateful. I made your life easy. You don't even have to worry about bills, but you don't appreciate it, do you?" I looked up slowly. "Bills?" I said softly. "You mean your bills?" His laugh was sharp, cruel. "Oh, come on, Maya. Don't start this." But I didn't stop, not this time. I'd swallowed too many sentences to let another one die in my throat. "I make more than you now." The words came out steady, almost calm, the calm that comes before something breaks. He blinked like he hadn't heard right. Then he laughed again, louder. "You? Don't make me laugh. Prove it." So I did. I turned my laptop toward him. The screen lit up his face, blue light against the red of his drunk, smug expression. His laughter caught somewhere between his throat and disbelief. "PayPal balance? $192,000. The air froze. For a second, I swear, even the rain stopped. He stared at the screen, then at me, then back again. His lips parted, searching for something to say. What came out was a snarl. "You used my money," he spat. "My internet, my house, my life." I stood slowly, hands trembling, but my voice was steady as a blade. "No, Dylan. You used my love." He slammed his palm against the table, sending the whiskey glass flying. The sound cracked through the room, but I didn't flinch, not this time. "I begged you to see me," I said, the words spilling out like air I'd been holding for years. "I stood beside you when you had nothing. I believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. And when I finally built something of my own, you laughed. You made me small so you could stay big." He stared at me, glass shards at his feet, chest heaving. "You're being dramatic," he said. I almost laughed. It came out like a choked sigh. "You don't even hear yourself." I walked to the door. My hand hesitated on the handle, not out of fear, but to feel the final weight of it all. Then I opened it. The rain had gotten heavier. The cold air bit at my skin as I stepped into the hallway. Behind me, I heard him call my name once, quiet, uncertain, almost human. But I didn't stop. Every step I took felt like an exhale I'd been holding for 3 years. My hands were shaking, my chest tight, but for the first time, the fear wasn't winning. It was fading. Down the elevator, through the lobby, past the night guard who didn't ask questions, out into the rain. The Seattle skyline blurred in the mist, lights shimmering through raindrops like tiny chances. I walked fast, suitcase wheels splashing through puddles. My hair stuck to my face, my breath came out sharp, but my legs didn't stop. When I reached the car, I tossed the keys onto the passenger seat and leaned against the door, breathing hard. My heart was pounding so violently it hurt. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling it beat, strong, alive, mine. I looked up at the condo tower above me, at the faint glow from his window. I didn't feel sad, not exactly, just done. "This isn't escape," I whispered, voice barely audible against the rain. "It's rebirth." The word lingered on my tongue, warm, defiant, holy. I got in the car and sat there for a long moment, watching the water streak down the windshield. My reflection stared back at me. Wet hair, red eyes, trembling lips. But beneath it all, something fierce was flickering. I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no messages, just silence. Good. For once, silence didn't mean defeat. It meant peace. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of the rain fill everything. Every wound, every bruise, every empty place he'd left behind. And when I opened them again, I smiled. Small, tired, but real. Tomorrow, I'd wake up to nothing. No plan, no safety net, no one waiting. But for the first time, it would all be mine. The silence the next morning wasn't empty. It was clean. For the first time in years, I woke up without hearing someone else breathing next to me. No echo of his voice, no clinking of whiskey glasses on marble counters. Just the faint hum of Seattle outside my window. Buses, footsteps, rain evaporating from rooftops. The air in my new apartment smelled like fresh paint and dust. Capitol Hill. 1 bedroom, if you could even call it that. White walls, wooden floors, 1 flickering lamp. I didn't have a bed, only a mattress on the floor. My desk was an old folding table I found on Facebook Marketplace. My laptop sat on it, waiting, like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. But it was mine. All of it. Even the silence. I made instant coffee and sat cross-legged on the floor. The cup was chipped, but the warmth felt real against my hands. For a second, I almost laughed. I had gone from a high-rise condo with a view of the bay to this, a creaky studio with paper-thin walls. And yet, I'd never felt richer. He used to say I'd never make it without him. He was half right. I didn't make it with him. I opened my laptop, the screen lighting up the room. The homepage of my website appeared, Maya Made Studios. Still small, still quiet, but alive. I whispered to myself, if I can survive heartbreak, I can survive anything. And that was the day I started over. I worked like I was possessed, 12 hours, sometimes 16. I designed, cut, stitched, photographed, packed. My fingertips blistered from fabric edges. My wrists ached from sewing late into the night. The floor was covered in threads and scraps, but to me, it looked like confetti, tiny pieces of freedom. I learned everything I didn't know: marketing, shipping, taxes, TikTok. I stayed up watching tutorials and scribbling notes until my eyes burned. When the orders were slow, I told myself it was just the calm before growth. Every sale notification on my phone made me smile. Not because of the money, but because each ding meant someone believed in me. Another piece of my freedom. I ate ramen and drank the cheapest coffee I could find. My back hurt from hunching over the sewing machine, but I didn't complain. For the first time, exhaustion didn't mean emptiness, it meant progress. Then, one night, everything changed. I posted a short TikTok, how I turned scraps into style. Just me in my little studio, showing how I transformed thrifted fabric into a luxury tote bag. It blew up overnight. The next morning, I woke to hundreds of notifications, then thousands. Comments, likes, emails, orders poured in faster than I could read them. I refreshed my dashboard. $5,000 in sales, then $20,000, then $60,000. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen, heart pounding. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from disbelief. I laughed until I cried, the good kind of crying, the kind that tastes like victory after hunger. I bought myself an industrial sewing machine that week, brand new, paid in cash. Then a real desk, a sturdy wooden one. I hung a sign above it, Maya Made Studios. No one clapped, but I didn't need applause. Peace was louder. I started to meet other women, small business owners, dreamers like me. I joined a local entrepreneur group. We met at coffee shops and shared tips, failures, hope. I told them my story, not the polished version, the real one. The late nights, the loneliness, the humiliation that turned into drive. And I saw their eyes light up. They didn't pity me, they understood me. For years, I called silence loneliness. Now I call it peace. Some of them ask for advice, how to start, how to keep going when you're scared. I stayed after our meetings, answering questions, helping them set up their first shops. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't just rebuilding a business, I was rebuilding myself. Then came the podcast. A host reached out after seeing my video. Would you share your story on our show? Sustainability through design. I hesitated. I wasn't used to being the one people listened to. But I said yes. The day it aired, I sat alone with my laptop, watching my face appear on the screen. I looked different, steady, free. Messages started flooding in from women all over. You inspired me to start again. Thank you for reminding me I'm enough. I cried, quietly this time, not because I was sad, but because I finally saw myself through their eyes. A few months later, I signed my biggest deal yet, a $900,000 wholesale partnership with REI. The same store I used to walk through years ago, pretending I could afford something from the shelves. Now, my products would be on those shelves. When I got the confirmation email, I put my face in my hands and laughed until tears fell between my fingers. I whispered, "You did it, Maya." Not we, just me. That night, I sat in my studio. The same space that once felt small now looked endless. Fabric rolls leaned against the wall. Order slips covered the table. The air smelled like cotton and lavender and independence. The condo was beautiful, but it never felt like mine. This studio, it's everything he said I couldn't have, because I earned every inch. It was close to midnight when my phone buzzed. I looked down. "Can we talk?" Dylan. For a moment, my chest tightened, not with pain, but with memory. The ghost of who I used to be hovered somewhere in that text. I stared at the message, then placed the phone face down on the table. No anger, no reply. Just peace. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the hum of the city below. The same city that had watched me fall apart and build myself back up, one stitch at a time. And I smiled to myself, whispering softly into the quiet, I didn't rebuild my life to look back. His name was trending, for all the raw. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dylan was unemployed, under investigation, drowning in the very ambition he used to weaponize against me. And I was surrounded by light. I didn't need revenge. The truth was enough. Later that afternoon, I opened Business Insider. My own feature was on the front page. From hobby to household brand, Maya Brooks of Maya Made Studios. Hundreds of comments scrolled beneath it. Congratulations, praise, women calling me an inspiration. But then I saw it, a tag buried in the thread. @Dylan Carter, remember her? My hand paused over the mouse. Not because I was angry, not because I missed him, but because for a split second I remembered that dinner. The wine glass shaking in my hand while he joked about my little craft shop. He had laughed in front of his colleagues, called me cute, small, dependent. And now the world was laughing at him, not with him, at him. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of old pain turn into air. The stories came fast. People love to dissect a downfall. Dylan was fired after the internal investigation, his accounts frozen. The perfect woman he left me for, Erin, drained their savings and disappeared. He moved into a small apartment in Bellevue, living off what little was left. Someone from the tech circle messaged me, gossip spilling over coffee emojis. "He's been calling everyone for help," they said. I typed back, "I hope he finds peace." And I meant it. No bitterness, no flames of triumph, just distance, like a mountain peak looking down on the storm it already survived. That night, after everyone left the office, I sat alone in my workspace. The last rays of sunset brushed across the logo on my wall, Maya Made Studios. 40 employees, international orders, products shipping across Europe. My hand drifted to the old wooden desk in front of me, the one I bought secondhand when I first started again. Its surface was scratched, edges worn smooth. I smiled at it like an old friend. "He said I couldn't survive without him," I whispered. "But look at me now, thriving, without even trying to prove it." The city outside glowed gold and gray. I let the silence wrap around me, not as loneliness, but as proof of peace earned. A week later, another email pinged in my inbox. Subject: "Not everything powerful needs to be seen. Some victories are meant to be felt." Then came the email. From Dylan Carter. Subject: "Please." The first line read, "I know I don't deserve it, but I need work, anything you can offer, please." I stared at it for a long time, not out of pity, but because it was surreal seeing the words please and Dylan in the same sentence. There was a time I would have done anything to help him, a time I believed we were on the same side. Now I just felt nothing. No ache, no nostalgia, just stillness. Whatever part of me once bent around his storms had gone stone-cold quiet. I forwarded the email to my assistant, added a short note at the bottom. "Reply politely. Applications open to everyone." A few minutes later, she knocked on my door. "Are you sure you want me to send that?" I smiled, soft but sure. "Yes, because it's true." When the screen dimmed again, I sat back, hands in my lap. A single heartbeat thudded in my chest. Not heavy, not triumphant, just steady. I wasn't glad he lost. I was glad I no longer cared. "I never needed him to lose," I murmured. "I just needed myself to win." It wasn't vengeance that healed me. It was distance. The next morning, the office was buzzing with celebration. Boxes of new inventory arrived. The team laughed over coffee. Someone played music in the corner. I stood by the window, watching the city move. The same skyline that once looked too big for me now fit in my palm. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every night I thought I'd never make it, it all led here, to this quiet, powerful calm. A week later, the grand opening of our new headquarters arrived. Reporters, clients, partners, all waiting downstairs. I was finishing my notes for the ribbon-cutting speech when my assistant knocked. "Hey, Maya," she said softly, peeking in. "There's a man in the lobby asking for you. He says his name is Dylan Carter." For a moment, time didn't move. I closed my notebook, took a breath. No anger, no fear, just the faintest curve of a smile. "Tell him," I said quietly, "I'll be right there." He showed up at my office. The man who once owned every room he walked into now just stood outside mine, waiting. The door opened, and Dylan stepped inside. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward him. Whispers floated. My team knew who he was. The man from my old life. The man I'd built this one to outgrow. He stopped a few feet from my desk, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "You look good, Maya," he said, voice rough. "I am," I replied. He looked around the office, the bright walls, the glass logo that said Maya Made Studios, the rows of products and mood boards and women working with purpose. "This place," he murmured. "It's incredible." "You really made it." I tilted my head. "I didn't make it, Dylan. I built it." He flinched slightly, but smiled. That tired, shame-filled smile of someone who knows they're walking through the wreckage of their own pride. "I made mistakes," he said, voice trembling. "I know I did. I said things I shouldn't have. I treated you." I cut in before he could finish. "Like I was small, because it made you feel big." He looked down. For a long moment, there was only the steady hum of the sewing machine from the next room, the sound of creation continuing, even as broken things tried to explain themselves. He whispered, "I lost everything, Maya. My job, my money, my reputation. Erin left. I don't even blame her." He took a shaky breath. I need a chance. I'll take any position, anything." I studied him, this man who once dictated my worth in dollars, who laughed when I said I'd start a business, who decided when I could dream. Now, he was asking for permission to exist inside something I built. "You know, Dylan," I said finally, "I used to think power meant being in control. But now I know. Real power is being free." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I made you small because I was scared," he said. "You were becoming everything I couldn't be." I didn't look away. "You weren't scared," I said quietly. "You were selfish." The words didn't rise in anger. They fell like truth, and truth doesn't need to scream. He let out a breath that almost sounded like a sob. "Please," he whispered. "I'll take anything." I nodded, a small smile forming. It was. But I think I stopped being her a long time ago. No one asked anything else. They didn't need to. I walked back to my desk. My nameplate gleamed against the surface. Maya Brooks, founder and CEO. The title still felt new, but the peace that came with it felt ancient. I traced the edge of my old sewing machine sitting by the corner. It was scratched, a little rusty, but it still worked. It always had. "Power doesn't shout," I whispered to myself. "It stands." And in that quiet room, surrounded by everything I had built from nothing, I realized I wasn't standing against him anymore. I was standing for myself. Later that afternoon, my assistant came in holding a printed email. "From the Women in Business Summit," she said, smiling. "They want you to be the keynote speaker in New York." I took the paper from her hand, scanning the words slowly. Keynote speaker, New York. My heart didn't race. It settled, like it had found its rhythm again. I looked out through the glass walls at my team, my people, my work, my world. From hobby to empire, I thought. And I smiled, because I wasn't done, not even close. I shut my laptop, straightened my blazer, and walked toward the floor. Each step echoed steady, certain, the kind of sound that comes when a woman finally owns the space she once begged to belong to. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. I was already there.